Comeback Team Podcast. Welcome, community. Here again with Coach Chuck Wolf, Trevor T.A. Anderson, Robert Masson here. This particular podcast, we're going to focus very simply on our seasonal cycling concept that we introduced in the Park City edition. Now we're in an Orlando edition. We're talking about summer sports, Florida style. You know, the most notable, golf, tennis, cycling, running, walking, the most common things we all do. But at this point, when we talked about initiation, we talked about maintenance strategies, and then we talked about seasonal cycling before, I think one of the cornerstone foundational things that we like to encourage is that preparation phase. So yeah, initiation, but there's a pre-initiation phase, and that's the preparation phase. And that came out really well in the Park City seasonal cycling thing. So here we are, you know, we're in early May as we film this. We're going to be playing a lot of things this summer. COVID's behind us for most people. For so many people who are vaccinated, we're all going to get out there. We're all going to be doing things. And there are some real important values to how you should train for your sport, prepare for your sport, improve your flexibility, improve your mobility, improve your strength, improve your building blocks, your foundations. And we're going to provide as much short-term information and thoughts as we can to help you structure and organize and process that. You know, Chuck, as you go into this summer, you know, tell me what your foundational thoughts are as you are going to do it yourself over the years, or tell one of your clients who you know as an avid golfer with some orthopedic, you know, at least red flags.
One of the things I keep in mind is what I call the action pyramid. Action pyramid is 4 levels. The base is their function. I have to understand how they're moving, and we need to make sure, we've talked about the big movement rocks before. We need to talk about the mobility of the foot, ankles, the hips, the thoracic spine. Make sure those are moving properly. Then from there we go into our fitness, the next layer up. If we have the function down to at least normal function, whatever that might be, let's improve the fitness. The fitness is the mobility, the flexibility, the strength, the cardio work. It doesn't have to be like it was in the old days of cardio going out for 20 to 30 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week. Today you can incorporate it, and I know some of the classes you've done, TA, is you incorporate the mobility, you incorporate the strength, and it's one station after the other, and you've got a good cardio program going that's not only going to get them stronger, but it's also going to burn fat tissue, because in the summertime we always like to hear, well, we got to get our beach bodies back, right? Right. And you guys do a great job with it. Then from the fitness level, we look at technique, or we look at the skill. In golf, as an example, we've got to make sure of the rotation. We have to talk about grip. You have to talk about the plane of the swing and so on. And you can incorporate that, but that's going to feed on top of the fitness and on top of the function. And then you get to the technique, which is what is the refinement. That's how I look at things. We can break it into strength. We can break it into isolated strength and integrated strength. But at the end of the day, we move as an integrated mechanism, organism, and we have to play that way.
TA, I'm going to frame this question for you because it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine as a sports spine surgeon who's also an athlete. You know, golf particularly has more cheats, more gimmicks, more pivots from a mechanical, how to make your swing better, faster, stronger, farther than any other sport I'm aware of. And from a performance expert perspective, you know, what is your take? And this could be controversial. Maybe it'll be.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, what's your take on hybrids and some of the extreme angles of clubs and grip gimmicks and all the different things that people do to improve their swing without improving their physical capacity or health?
Yeah, if you look at 9 out of 10 golf books, they say, here's how you hit it longer and straighter. And the first thing they talk about is what club can help them do that, right? What trinket or gimmick or swing aid can help them do that. I'm not saying that none of them are valuable, because the best swing aids and little things, they help put you into a right position that allows your body to function properly to get the job done.
Right.
But the golf industry is, I think last I checked, is an $80 billion industry.
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
And it's not because people are introspectively looking at themselves with accountability and saying, I
Right.
need to get my body in a better position to be able to hit the ball better.
Right.
It's because I'm not hitting enough fairways. I didn't break 100. I need to go buy a new driver. Honey, can I buy a new driver? Would you mind? Because I know it's going to make me play better.
Right.
I think that there's so much of the industry is looking outside of themselves versus introspectively to find out what the real issue is. And so it is irritating to me. And it is irritating to me in this sense, that if people realize how much control they have over their own improvement, of their own just improving their physical body, because the reality is, if you can fix somebody's movement, you can fix their performance, whether they're playing golf, basketball, baseball, football, tennis, whatever the case is. If you can fix and improve their movement, you can improve their performance. Now, the big fad lately with golf has been how to have more speed. There's all these weighted swing sticks and all of this different type of stuff.
Optimization.
I mean, listen,
heads.
so it looks cool, and you start swinging these things really hard, and then of course you pick up your regular club and it feels like you're swinging it faster. Neurologically and scientifically, what happens is actually it slows you down. Like the old school holding 3 or 4 bats in the on-deck circle or bats with the donuts. Of course, when you have 1 bat instead of 3 bats, it feels like you're swinging it faster. But the reality is you're actually moving it slower neurologically.
Right.
So our goal is to help educate these folks first. Here's what's happening with people that are swinging these heavy sticks that are distally loaded, right? They're putting a ton of tension on the wrist, the elbow, the shoulders, the obliques, and they're creating unnatural deceleration patterns, right? And really tugging on the obliques. And I know you've seen some of these overuse and unnecessary overloading injuries.
Correct.
And for me, I think there's a way for us to achieve that type of speed by first starting with stability, right? Because it's not just about the power that you generate, but the power you actually can physically maintain throughout the course of the swing. So if you can start in balance, have a good range of motion with mobility, and then sequence properly and finish back in stability, then you can truly maximize that. A lot of the magazines aren't going to tell you about that. You know why? Because it doesn't sell product. So like you said, it may sound controversial, but I'll tell you from right now, from my heart, if you want to become a better golfer, learn how to move better, learn how to be more stable, more mobile, and how to coordinate more properly. And it's going to take you a lot farther than any swing aid or any kind of club, brand new club is going to do you.
To your point, when you go from the backswing and you start coming down into the follow-through, they're pushing down into the ground.
Yes, sir.
Then you have to decelerate. First of all, you have to have a stability point through there, and then decelerate through the swing to the follow-through, and have the stability at that point.
Right.
There's a component through there called deceleration.
Mm-hmm.
Well, deceleration is our ability to absorb the force. Most fitness programs don't do that.
Void of deceleration work.
And it's the lack of control of deceleration is where you see the increased
stress
risk
on the joints.
and you see the most risk of injury. Correct.
Right.
So part of the programming, we have to include
For sure.
some form of deceleration. And you could start very remedially by just bouncing and then small little bounces and do it in multiple directions, all the way up to box jumps.
Absolutely.
But we have to have the ability to control that first.
Yes.
And make sure that the deceleration is coming through the proper regions of the body.
Right, and adding on to that also, I mean, if we understand how the brain works, the brain is such a sympathetic organ that it wants to protect us from injury or from bad situations, right? So if we're moving in a fashion that our brain thinks that we may potentially be out of control or don't have the ability to actually slow down, it will not allow us to produce that maximum force, that maximum speed, and get to there. So there's all these people that want to improve their speed and their distance, but they're not improving their deceleration patterns and their stability to be able to accept that new speed. So their brain's just basically turning it off. You ever try to take a golf cart and drive downhill and it takes off, but then all of a sudden it pulls back because there's a governor on there, right? Because it won't allow the golf cart to go out of control. Well, our brain's doing the same thing. And if we don't understand how to stabilize first, if our car doesn't realize that it has brakes to slow it down, it's not going to allow us to put the pedal to the metal on the accelerator.
Let's take this another way. 100% of what you said. But we haven't accounted for or you get that weekend warrior who may have had an ankle injury way back when, or
Right.
sits a lot at their desk and they're tight in the hips.
They show up for golf.
And they show up for golf
Unprepared. Yeah.
without movement prep.
That's right.
And they use some of these tools, some of these
Well,
things are being offered
that's
commercially.
so common. You know, and
You
I
see it a lot. And I'm sure you
I
see it
end
a
up
lot in your
seeing
practice.
them most of the time because they come at the end of this journey,
Right.
and they've got their back problem fully formed, full force, and it's a little too late. And even the compensation and recovery is going to be limited because they've got so many bad habits and compensation patterns. But I think to some extent, I at least have to say it in clear conscience, some of the cheats actually potentiate the eventuality of seeing someone like me.
Yes.
Because you're missing your window, you're
Right.
missing your opportunity
Right.
to recognize that that cheat is helping something that your body isn't letting you do.
Yes.
Therefore, it's affecting most commonly your lumbar spine, your knee, or your hip
Right.
in an adverse way. And without focusing on the biomechanical opportunity you have, you're actually increasing your risk of needing a knee, hip, or spine surgery at some point, and the extent of that surgery when it does happen.
No doubt about that. And so warm up, to Chuck's point, warm up is not the temperature outside, right? It's intercore muscle temperature, getting, as you mentioned on a previous podcast, that musculature to move about one another and kind of have a good play with one another, right? And there's also fascia and everything included into there. But because we go outside on a hot floor today and it's 90 degrees, doesn't mean we're warmed up.
Yeah, well,
Because
that's the semantics.
Yeah.
The semantics make people think, oh, well, it's not cold weather, so I don't need to warm up.
Warm up is
But
neuro.
it has nothing to do with warmth.
Yeah, warm up is neuro.
Yeah.
Warm up is the nervous system getting prepared to perform.
Yeah.
And so thinking about it from the golf perspective is one thing, and the reason why it's such an interesting sport, if you think about it, all the athleticism and power and movement and speed and acceleration, deceleration happens standing in one place.
Yeah.
Now, so that's where some of the forces people have challenging time dealing with them, especially when they have a small nagging injury and they start creating compensation. Now let's take that to a different sport. Coach, something that you've excelled at a high level at. I'll be the first to admit that when I got on the tennis court with you for the first time, I got it handed to me. And what I noticed the most about playing tennis with you was that there was a fluidity, a calmness, you weren't trying to overpower the game, right? A lot of these people, they want distance, so they put a club in their hand, they swing as hard as they can because they want to overpower the game. The game is not meant for that. The game of tennis, I swing hard and fast, and I don't have as much control as I'd like to, but sometimes when I see an aggressive opportunity, I try to overpower the game. And what I learned from you is being able to stay right in your slot, right in your lane, be consistent as the key, and then it allows your athleticism to kind of take over and find its own place. Tell me more about that.
You know, like so many sports, positioning, speed, footwork, hip and torso work is the driving force to your competency once you get to a certain level of the game. So, you know, my technical self in tennis has a few moves. I just do a few moves pretty well. But what I work on to get my best self in tennis is my footwork, my timing, my anticipation, the contact point. And when I hit my hardest ball, it's my most effortless swing. It's the chain that you guys talk about all the time, where I've come up on it, I'm rotated back, I'm loaded, I coil, my wrist, the lag, everything you talk about in the golf swing is the same exact thing in tennis. And that's also a very physically happy swing in the sense that I don't feel any stress or torso. When I'm caught defensively and positionally, I have to hit a great hard shot out of position without proper, preparation phase. So I'm really torquing it with my shoulder or my arm. Yeah. That's where I feel the stress in my back or my hips and my thing. So, at the end of the day, it's speed of the game, whether it's football, racing, tennis, anything else. Now, golf doesn't really apply to speed of the game, but if you're prepared in every shot and you've got a fairly simple kinetic chain in every shot, And then it becomes really not about what am I going to do with this ball, but where am I going to put it and why.
Right.
And it's a three-dimensional game, and it's inside outside. And then your speed of shots doesn't come from muscling.
Right,
your speed of shot comes from the chain and the flexibility and the effortlessness.
Right.
And the better I get, the more effortless I am. And when I was young, overachieving, I was a musclehead tennis player in the sense that I would force everything, and I'm getting better at not forcing it.
Yeah. So what you're saying? Excuse me one second, Chuck. I'm gonna transition to you. So what you're saying is, you're not playing tennis swing anymore. You're not playing tennis stroke. You're playing tennis. So you're playing the game that's out there.
Correct.
Not the game that's right here, because you're allowing the fluidity and the natural athleticism to start taking over.
And my preparation and training isn't about arm flexibility or strength. It's about hip, hamstring, quad.
Exactly.
I mean, even, I'm approaching 58. I'm so much more likely to work on my hamstring and my internal and external hip rotators now, because that gives me so much more transverse plane stuff for swing. Right. I get way more power by having an optimal hip and lower upper leg flexibility, torsion, strength, pivot, rate of rotation than I will swinging my arm 6% faster. So
we talk about the same thing with hitting the golf ball far. I work with the longest hitter in the world, Tim Burke.
Right.
There's a handful of people that hit it the distance that he does, two-time world champion. And when they ask him, what is your secret? He said, number one, stability. Number two, and this is ironic, it seems ironic, he goes, the last thing I do before I swing is I loosen my jaw. I just loosen my jaw because it relieves all the tension. So even though I have specific intention on being connected to the ground, I'm releasing my jaw and allowing everything to be loose. Because we say loose is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah.
Right? So you've seen that happen with the tennis racket. We've seen it happen with the longest hitters in the world. Chuck, and something that you really specialize in, right? Which is kind of like that triathlon world where the running, the biking, the swimming, and more like you're a real Ironman, man. I mean, you played professional baseball. I've seen you shoot basketball at a high level. I've seen you throw footballs at a high level. I've seen you do everything, every ball that you picked up and everything you've done. You've looked athletic doing it, right? And you're almost 30 years old now, so I know you've been doing this for a few years. But from the let's just start with biking, and that kind of triathlon world. That's a whole different world. That's a whole different world of anaerobic endurance, consistency, training. How does that biking world figure in? The same way that Coach talks about his deliberate nature about tennis, the way I talk about being very specific and refined in golf. How does that relate to that biking world and that triathlon world?
Before I answer that, can I just go back to a point that you brought up of your most powerful tennis strokes are effortless. I work with a lot of baseball players, a lot of pitchers who have had injury, and they are top-down throwers. Just like you said in your younger days, muscling it, you were trying to hit from the top down. If you go from the bottom up and just be fluid, be mobile, be stable, but let the body do the work. I tell these kids and these players, let your body do the work. The arm's attached to the torso and it goes for the ride. You shouldn't feel anything in your arm and your shoulder. And when it comes to multi-sport athletes, what's interesting about multi-sport athletes, particularly the ones that I've evaluated, they come in with so many of the same common injuries of shoulder, low back in particular. Their training is so much forward and back. That's the last plane of motion that they need to work. Yeah. And cyclists that come in, and being an avid cyclist myself and doing a lot, the thing I have to work on is stretching my hip flexors because they are in, let it be if they're a road bike or if they're a time trialist or a triathlete where they're down in the aero position or down in the drops, everything here gets short. Yeah. So if they get short, hip flexors get short, quads get tight, hamstrings get a bit short.
The lower back gets tight.
The lower back gets tight, but it's interesting. The low back feels tight, and I'm going to emphasize feels tight because in the proper position, the ligaments of the back and the soft tissue of the back is really long. So the tissues are tensioned.
Taut.
Yeah.
They're long and taut, which gives the sensation of tight.
Yeah. Gotcha.
The hip flexors are short, which now give you tightness. So when they come in with back pain, I have to first look at pelvic position, but then I want to see what their hip flexors are like. Their psoas and their iliacus, the deep hip flexors in particular.
My spine evaluations have completely changed since I've known you guys and articulated at a point where I could even grasp it. Because, yeah, everything you just said as it relates to spinal movement and mobility is so interconnected with the internal, external hip rotation, flexibility, and asymmetries of left versus right and compensation patterns and things like that. You know, the one thing that you mentioned, you know, since you cycle and you play golf, and I see it all the time. In Florida, you know, a lot of guys cycle. They do that privately during their week. A lot of women I know. And then they go play golf on the weekend. And they don't train for golf because they cycle. Well, it's all anteroposterior stuff. There's no transverse plane prep at all.
So true.
And shocker, you know, they end up with a back problem that it's not surgical. They know it. We know it. But they've got predictable pain and they have predictable setbacks. And the most obvious, simple preparation was simply transverse plane preparation.
Well, 80% of folks' workouts, you can walk into any gym, you can walk into any, you know, big box gym or most gyms. You're going to see 80% of the work that people are doing is going to be sagittal. You know, there's a little bit of frontal and rarely any transverse plane exercises.
Yeah.
And that's where this education becomes a very valuable aspect, is because this multiplanar environment is so critical for us to train in, because life exists in that environment.
Yeah.
You know, I had a strength coach tell me one time that he threw his back out lifting an empty shoebox because it was down here, and he thought it was one weight and it was something else, and he reached over and went to pick, and he, you know, yanked his back in the bad way. Against himself, you know, and it's like, because he'd been
and I hear that all the time.
Training so linear, you know?
Number one most common prompt to somebody with avoidance of spine problems for me is reaching into the back of the trunk to grab something.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. I hear more surgical stories come out of that move in the deep trunk than any other story on earth.
You know, the thing that you alluded to earlier, you said earlier, and I want to get back to it, it relates to multi-sport athletes. When I see endurance runners come in and they're having, let it be, if it's knee, back, hip issues, they're taught to try and run efficiently, and that's being nice and tight, very sagittal plane dominant, not a whole lot of rotation, and be under control, which we want to be under control, but everything is just very limited in its motion. After evaluation, I want to train them for a while as a sprinter.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Because now it's lengthening everything out.
Yes.
You said something a little while ago that Tim Burke says one of the last things he does is relax his jaw.
Yeah.
Well, have you ever watched straight on a 100-meter sprinter?
Yeah.
And what goes on at their face?
The one that's winning.
The one that's often
the
winning.
way
But
they
even the ones that are behind, you
yeah.
just see this relaxed and flowing.
Yeah.
And if all athletes, all people who work in warehouses, all people who sit at the desk job, I'm going to quote a guy, I'm going to steal from this guy right now, and who said, there was a guy named Coach T.A. Anderson said, stretch what's in the front and strengthen what you can't see in the back, and it makes all the sense in the world. Because gravity takes us into this position. Our jobs typically take us into this position.
Our tech these days
take us into this position. Our beach bodies take us into the anterior, what's on the front side.
What you see in the mirror, the front.
What you see in the mirror, but stretch what's in the front and strengthen what's in the back. That was such great wisdom that you said, and I thought it's stuck in my mind for a long time. Even though I've tried to do it, I've done it, and I have my clients and patients do that. But the way you said it was perfect.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's always this agonist and antagonist like mindset, right? So I love what you said. I take distance runner and sprint them. At some point, they need to be able to sprint. And what happens is after
diversification.
After long periods of time, you know, that taps into the oxidative system. Very low power output, very high aerobic capacity, right? And in contrast to a 100-meter sprinter, which is very high power output, very low aerobic capacity. But if I can train for anaerobic endurance, anaerobic power endurance, I'm going to cross over and get that aerobic result, right? So for a golfer, they would have to say sometimes, I need to do my cardio. For what? I said, the only reason you should go run 10 miles is if you're getting ready to run a 10-mile race, or you're going to go run, or if you're a distance runner. But the kind of cardio that we need on the golf course really has to do with anaerobic endurance.
Yeah.
So the swing lasts is 1.3 to 1.5 seconds. But I tell you what, it doesn't make anybody tired. But swing it 10 times at top speed. Then you're going to go, right? Now we're tapping into a different energy system now. So the energy systems are just as important as training the muscles and creating balance and all this stuff. But I take distance runners and I sprint them, right? Sometimes we take very strong people and give them very light weights and tell them to move it fast, right? Sometimes we try to take a guy who all he throws is fastballs and we get him to long toss something slow. Right, we're always trying to find that antagonist movement pattern, right? And that's what helps keeps us balanced and also improves a performance. So, and from the tennis perspective, you know, we see it a lot. A coach from a long old time coach back in the day, he was telling me one time that when you look at somebody like Federer, right? You look at somebody like Federer, and he's as a young player in his career, he was very fast, he was very quick, he was very powerful. But look at him now. He's still dominating, right? He might not be number one in the world at the moment, but look what he's doing. He's changing his strategy. He's changing his efficiency. If somebody hits a ball in the opposite side alley, he just goes, hey, you got it. And he saves his energy for the next one. They're becoming smarter athletes. You're learning how to exist. How does Tom Brady go out there and dominate and win a Super Bowl at 43 years old? How does that happen? It doesn't happen because he's the most physically gifted athletically. It doesn't happen because he has the strongest arm in the league, but the industry will have you to believe that these are the most important things, right? Yeah. But strategy, wisdom, as we talked about in the previous podcast, commitment to excellence, commitment to participation, and then making sure that you have a balanced regimen that covers all the bases from nutrition, hydration, and otherwise.
I want to say one more point before we close, and what you just said about the media, and you were relating it to Tom Brady. Now, how many times have we heard the media say that an athlete who's in their late 20s or maybe their mid-30s, they're getting towards the end of their career. If you train properly, if you stretch and do your movement prep, if you do proper strength training in proper doses and periodize, sometimes it's light, sometimes a little heavier, sometimes you do more explosive.
And cycle.
Diversify and cycle. That's a cycle, and do some cross-training. Don't specialize in your sport when you're young. Parents, don't have your kids specialize in a sport until they're maybe 15, but probably 16, 17, 18. But if you take all the components of fitness and you train very smart, I guarantee it. I've seen it in patients and clients I've worked with, and me personally, I was the strongest, most fit when I was in my early to mid 40s. And if it wasn't for injuries, I'd still be out with you and be able to take you on in anything except maybe slam ball.
All right. Bold statement from the oldest of the OGs. So
the oldest of the G's.
All right, Comeback Team community. Thank you again for joining us as we enter this great summer season coming up. We'll see you soon. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and at comeback.team. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Enjoy.